Hey guys, Kenny with ScooterDad.com, and today we're going to talk about installing a Phoenix Switchblade brake on a non-Phoenix deck. Today I'll be using an Envy deck, but the process is really the same for any flex fender brake and any deck. As with any of these projects, please be careful when using power tools. Before we begin, let's take a look at the tools and parts that you will need to get this done. Of course, you'll need your deck, and you'll need a complete Phoenix Switchblade brake, including all of the pieces that come with it, such as the rubber washer, the two bolts, the metal washers, and the nuts. You're also going to need a 5/16 inch combination wrench, a 3mm Allen key, I recommend a T-handle, a drill, cordless or corded should work fine, a 7/64 inch drill bit for the pilot hole, a 13/64 inch drill bit for the main hole. I've used a 5/16 inch drill bit for the countersink, although if you have a special countersink bit, that'll work as well. A hammer, a center punch, a box knife, masking tape, a Sharpie or other similar marker, and some scissors. Alright, let's get started. The first thing you need to do is remove your wheel and rear axle. You also need to remove the brake. Conveniently, on this scooter, the brake was already broken off. The next step is to test fit your brake and make sure it's going to fit. Place your brake upside down on the top of the deck and use a marker to mark where the holes will line up on the top of your deck. Now carefully use a box knife to cut out a notch in your grip tape where you're going to drill the holes. And please don't try to do it in fast forward like I'm doing here. Repeat what you did before by holding your brake upside down and marking the holes on the deck. This time we're doing it so we know where to drill. Now take your hammer and center punch and carefully make a divot in the middle of each one of those marks. This is going to act as a guide for when we start drilling. This is an important step, so don't skip it. Without this step, it'll be hard to keep your drill bit centered where you want it to drill. Using your 7/64 inch bit, carefully drill a pilot hole in each one of the marks. The pilot hole will make it easier for the larger bit to drill through your deck. Again, this is an important step, so don't skip it. Next, you're going to switch to your 13/64 inch bit and drill the actual holes for the bolts. For the next step, I can't urge you enough to be careful. If you're not careful, you could ruin your deck with this step. You're better off to skip this step than do it wrong. Using your 5/16 inch bit, we're going to do a small countersink on each one of these holes. You're just going to use the tip of the bit to make a small bevel so that the bolts sit down in the deck a little bit. Here you can see just how slight the bevel is that I've made. What you're looking at is that silver ring around the edge of the hole. I've used just the tip of the bit to make a slight cut. If you aren't confident and you want to skip this step, that's fine. Your bolts will just stick up a little bit more. For the next step, install your bolts, washers, and nuts onto your brake just like they'll be after it's installed. You don't need to worry about the rubber washer for now. Just get your nuts barely threaded onto the bolts because we're going to remove them here in just a second. Holding your brake upside down, let your bolts fall until the nuts and the washers are resting on the underside of the brake. Now take a piece of masking tape and securely tape the nuts and the washers to the underside of the brake. Make sure and get the tape all the way around because you're going to need it to hold the nuts in place. Once the tape is secure, you can remove the bolts. They should thread out easily. This next step isn't shown because I already had a rubber washer that was cut, But you're going to want to take some scissors and cut a notch out of one end of the rubber washer so that it fits easily against the square bend in your brake. Now take that rubber washer, put it on top of the brake, and slip it into the deck. You want the hole in the washer to align with the rear hole in the deck and the brake. Now carefully thread your bolts through the hole in the deck and the brake and into the taped nuts. Be very gentle as you do this so that you don't break the tape loose. You don't want those coming loose inside there and having to start this process all over again. Once you have the bolts threaded through the deck and into the nuts, you're in the home stretch. Use your 5/16 combination wrench to hold the nut and the tape on the bottom of the brake, and use your 3mm Allen key to tighten the bolt on the top. Depending on the shape of the deck, it may or may not be easy to hold the nut with the combination wrench. You can try to remove the tape prior to this step if you want, but I've left tape in decks for months and it's never caused a problem. If you're running 110mm wheels, you may have to bend the brake up a little bit. The best way to do this is to sit on the deck backwards and use a wrench underneath the brake to pull upwards slightly to give it a little bit of a bend. This is typical and it ensures that your brake doesn't ride too high. And now the hard part's over. Just reinstall your rear wheel and axle and you're good to go. Enjoy your rattle-free ride.